It's real. It's real. You know the deal. You know the deal. Come on.
Hey, it's Shanté.
And I'm Natalie, and welcome to What's the Deal, a podcast powered by the Norfus Firm. At the Norfus Firm, we solve people problems, and we have the great pleasure of working with employers all around the world on HR, DEI, and workplace culture initiatives. Hey, what's up?
Hey,
How's it going?
yeah, pretty good. How are you?
Good. Is that one of your infamous "I bought it in another country"?
No,
Cute
no.
little.
This is good old US of A. Yeah. This is not the
Anytime you
flex that it
tell
normally
Shantae you
is.
like something she's wearing, she will probably tell you that she got it in Tokyo or Portugal or South Africa that none of us could go get right now, which is a really dope flex, except for the fact that you want the stuff that Shantae
Yeah,
wears.
exactly. Can't have it. Nah.
Okay, so since we're not going to spend a whole episode talking about how fly you are, why are we here today?
So it's, I think, in the light of everything that's happening in the world and our drive to make these workplaces a little bit better for folks, we want to talk about how coaching can really impact culture and how it can really influence the employee experience and make it even better, and just try to shift people's mindset when it comes to coaching, how it can be applied.
And it's interesting because even you saying that draws out for me the way in which coaching is sort of doled out in the haves and have not kind of way, right? Because when, at least from like my experience in like being in the HR space for so long, coaching by itself typically refers to when someone's not doing something well and we have to sit down and give them some coaching on a particular incident. And what we're talking about today is what's typically called executive coaching, right? Which is a completely different genre of coaching that all too often only goes to executives.
Mm-hmm. And it's looked at as more of a development resource or perk when they're looking to groom someone into a higher role within an organization. Then they'll pull out the executive coaching card. And again, if we're looking at this from an equity standpoint, why should only certain people have access to this resource, or at least, right, like these kinds of conversations? So I think it's just talking through how to apply coaching to organizations in order for it to be more equitable, more impactful, and more inclusive for folks. Because it's a really magical tool when done well. It really is. Yeah.
So for today's episode, we're using coaching and executive coaching synonymously to mean sort of a development tool as opposed to giving someone constructive feedback, which can happen inside of coaching, executive coaching, but that's not what we're talking about. Now, Shanté has recently finished a really, you've been certified by more than one organization as an executive coach, but you did finish a program that was super intense and really sort of got into the nuts and bolts. So through that type of training that you have, how does coaching get described? Like, what are sort of the reasons in which you would employ that as a resource?
Yeah, coaching is a partnership, right? It is really about creating and holding space for a person to be able to come into greater awareness of themselves or situations or ways in which they can show up differently in order to have a different result. And so when you're thinking about coaching, in the sense of like a true coaching relationship, the coach takes a bit of a back seat. Like, there really are the guardrails, there really are the guides. Now, there folks think about, often in executive, it's funny because often in executive environments, folks often think that coaches advise or they consult or they offer, all these things. And if it's a true coaching thing, if it's a true coaching thing, we can get into that. It really is. You may be able to impart some knowledge because, obviously you have it because you're in that position, right? To coach, you've been in these rooms or in these scenarios, but really it's not the first go-to. It really is something that if you notice that your client is stuck, and again, we can get into more of that, but it really is like, it is a tool, but you got to know when to bring it in. And so the coach really has to be skilled in what's the energy that's here, what's needed and how do I guide this so that so that it sticks, so that person comes into it on their own, so that they really get it and they can embody it. So.
And I mean, I think if you're looking at it from that, and Shanté knew what my hand raise meant, because I'm also an executive coach, but Shanté and I have very different styles, which is actually great. We regularly talk about that if we were the same, you would not get this cool ass content, because same is
Right.
boring,
Right.
different is exciting.
Right.
And so our approaches are different, but we are coming at this for similar reasons, right? Really, when you're looking at going into coaching, and what I take away from what you just described is having a qualified person help reflect you to you.
Yeah.
A mirror, right?
Yes.
And understanding how you show up in your workplace. Now, I also think it's important, before we really dive in to why we shouldn't be applying this sort of development method to executives only, right? Because that's sort of important here. It's also important to really be thoughtful of how it gets used, because I think one of the most frustrating ways in which I see it get used is sort of punitive, right? We've had a number of in Shanté, because we have really cool different styles. Shanté and I co-coach a lot, and that is an experience that you will never forget, because it's very luxurious to have both me and Shanté
Sure is.
coaching you. It is like some 5-star shit. You hear me? Like Michelin star, months-long
Coaching.
appointment to
Yes.
experience coaching with Natalie and Shanté, but
Unmatched.
But the thing that has always been hard for us is when people come to us like 1 foot out the door. What do I mean? We get called after an investigation that we didn't do, find some level of wrongdoing with an executive, and the way they get to keep their job is to sit with me and Shanté. Not a great time to bring in coaching, because it's punitive. So the person who is sitting with us is trying to keep their job or find another one before they lose this one. And so you're putting sort of good money after bad, because 9 times out of 10, that person does not want coaching, does not think they did anything wrong. And so you're spending your first several sessions with them trying to get them to acknowledge why they're there, right? If you have an unwilling coaching client, you are more often than not wasting your money, unless you have a strategic reason for doing it. So there are strategic reasons why you might do it in those circumstances. But if you're going in with the knowledge that it's very unlikely it's going to lead to any sort of behavior change, fine. We adore the coaching, the proactive coaching calls we get, because it's not like someone is very unlikely going to be able to turn this around, and we want to be able to say we tried. That proactive coaching is, we see this person as a leader of any kind. It doesn't have to be a CEO or executive, but we see this person as a leader, and we want to acknowledge that and help this person refine their own leadership traits. Because if you also listen to what Shanté said, it's not getting a person to what other people think leadership should be. It's getting to the person to their own leadership style and helping them find their own answers.
Right.
Now, some of us are a little bit more giving of the answers, which is my approach, and some of us are more extracting of those answers, which is Shanté's approach. And again, both are valuable, right? And both, and we both have the skill set to do both. To be clear, we are not one-dimensional, right? At all. Let me flip my hair a little bit, because we got a lot of different tools. But yeah, I think it's the framing of why you're doing it that becomes really important, because again, it's a lot of these mindless things. It's funny for companies who try to be really tight with budgets and really tight with decision making on the resources. Sometimes they just throw money around at things, and you're like, that was never going to work in the first place, right? Because the why wasn't well articulated, right? Exactly. So I think that framing of why you're entering into a coaching relationship or paying for your executives or whoever to go into a coaching relationship is important.
Very much so. And I think that, like everything, there's pre-work that's involved with that. So is the person even coachable? I know that gets thrown around a lot, but it's a real thing. There's some people who don't have the level of self-awareness that they can even go into it. Now, we're not saying you have to have all the self-awareness.
You know
That's part
exactly
of
what
why you're a
example I'm
coach.
thinking of.
I mean, there are plenty. So,
Oh, there's one where we kept saying, well, he could just get coaching. This is a year-long project we had. He could just get coaching. And three of us, another consultant who was also an executive coach, was like, he's not coachable.
Not coachable. Not coachable. And so you got to be able to identify that too, because to your point of throwing good money after bad, don't keep paying for something if this person is not able to actually receive it and take advantage of it. So, I mean, like, assess that first. Do you even want to make this investment in this person? Because can they even take advantage of it in the way that is beneficial to both them and the organization? And so, yeah, but again, that's not just at the executive level, which I think is the point that we're making. It's anyone in the organization.
But why do you think that happens? Why do you think executive coaching gets treated as an executive perk?
Well, because I think people have a limited view of leadership. And so I think that they believe that leadership is only exists at certain levels within an organization. When we know that leaders exist all throughout organizations, and so if you have a leadership characteristics, attributes, qualities that can be developed and nurtured anywhere. But I just think people, when they think leadership, they always think up here as opposed to throughout an organization. So because of that, it's framed as an executive thing, as an executive perk. But it's if you can shift the culture to move towards more of a place where coaching exists throughout the organization, I think you would do wonders for your employee experience personally.
And I think that's such an important point that doesn't get talked about enough, because again, we've gotten into this very blurred lines around words, which drives me and you crazy because we love these words. But a leader and a manager are completely different roles. So a lot of times people think, oh, the higher up, you're leading people. Well, you might have been leading people from the beginning. I think about our own organization and Stephanie, who's our business support manager. Stephanie's a leader, right? Even though most of her work is not seen, and she's probably going to be embarrassed that we're calling her out, because she does like to be behind the scenes, and she's so valuable and she's so amazing. But there's so many things that Shanté and I will see, like, oh, dang, you just did that. Like, that is dope, right? Or the way she self-innovates, like, oh, you guys are about to have a call with a potential client. Here's everything I could find about the company. That's a leader. That is someone who is like, this information could help us make better decisions. And so without being asked, I'm going to go find it for you guys. And so Stephanie would be a great candidate for coaching. Not necessarily because Stephanie wants to be a CEO one day. She doesn't have to want to be a CEO to get to benefit from coaching, right? It's acknowledging that she already exists as a leader in the way she moves throughout the world today, right? And she may not know that she's a leader already. All the Stephanies that exist throughout these different organizations who get things done because they care about the mission and they don't wait for someone to tell them. Now, they may never manage people, but that's not the only reason to get coaching, because a manager role is completely different. And in fact, I would submit a lot of what you need to be a lot of the skills you need to be a manager can happen through group training, right? Like, coaching is really more about how are you leading? How are you showing up in an organization, cognizant of KPIs and the direction of the organization and where your role fits into that?
Yeah, to me, it's like managing is like the thing that you do, right? But a leader is who you are.
Hey.
So it's really like really unlocking that for people, and allowing them to see that in themselves. Because to your point, Stephanie that's just what she does. She may not even think of it as leadership. She may not see herself as a leader, and we see that for her. And so it's also igniting that spark within people so that they can see, oh, okay, this is I have this and I can actually expand upon this and be big. And so you want to, that's the kind of growth that you want to see in people, is that it's just very expansive. And so that is not limited to people at the top of an organization.
And frankly, the fact that so little is poured in at lower levels of the organizations that we work with is a shame, because those are the rocks of your organization. Those are your foundation. Those are the people who are every day sort of executing on whatever, ideas are brought up at the top. And so why wouldn't you want them to receive sort of the best development to continue to do that, whether they move up or they expand at whatever level they're at? And so, in this situation, what we're saying, just to begin with, is when you're thinking about coaching that helps people develop a leadership style, be expansive in your view of who should receive it. Theoretically, your C-suite should be well developed by the time they get there anyway. So the fact that they end up being the ones who are the first candidates also says maybe you did something wrong in your hiring process, because if you have executives that are not clear on their leadership style, how to lead, and what a leader is versus a manager. But
it was a couple of steps that were missed at that point. Agreed. Yeah.
You're like, let me close that loop real quick.
How did we even get here?
So talk to me about this. We are What's the DEIL, which stands for diversity, equity, and leadership. How does DEI fit into coaching?
I mean, it's the perfect marriage, I think. They support one another really, really well, because when you think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it is about the people. It is about really getting to who they are and what work they do and how they can do the best work, and where they can be, their talents and skills can be best used, and how they can feel like included in that sense of belonging within an organization. Coaching allows you to really drill into the person. Coaching allows you to really be on that one-on-one with them, that gets you to understand them and their possibility and their potential. So it allows you, when you're in that mindset as someone who is administering coaching, right, having that relationship or that conversation, you gotta really get curious. You really gotta lean into them, and you really gotta understand, okay, what's going on with you? How are these concepts, or how are we moving, or what's the energy, and all these things, in order to understand what's happening, in order to bring out that potential help to bring out that potential within that person. And so it requires a very individualistic approach. You have to acknowledge people, their personhood, their humanity. Who are they? Where do they come from? Their backgrounds, their languages, their status, all these things play into how people show up within the workplace. And in order to be able to pull the most out of them, you got to understand what that is in order to speak to it within the coaching, and listen for certain things in order to bring awareness to them. So you got to be in lockstep with the DEI work.
So really, what you're talking about is coaching being inclusive from multiple different standpoints, right? As a coach, we have to be trained in how to work with multiple types of personalities and people, right? So we have to have our own inclusivity, and that actually gets at a point I hadn't thought about, is being thoughtful of how you choose your coaches. Are they one-dimensional in their approach, or are they thoughtful of the person that's coming before them? It also gets at the inclusiveness of how you choose who gets coaching, right? Because you're being thoughtful of the people, and that, people need different things. And while it may sound like we're saying, hey, give people coaching because it's the nice thing to do. No, yes, it's nice, but really what we're saying too is it helps your leaders that you get this coaching for be inclusive of others, right? Because they're learning about themselves, how they show up, and they're also learning the types of questions they can ask, to be curious with others that they work with, the ways in which they can include people in decision making or executing an idea, or whatever the case may be is. And so I would submit that one of the biggest letters of the acronym is inclusion when you're thinking about coaching, just from all the different people, the roles that are playing into the coaching happening, and the outputs of what we think successful coaching looks like.
Yeah, and coaching comes from different people in different ways. If the organization is set up in a way to be able to do that. Coaching, you can have internal coaches, right? Like folks who show up, and that is their job within an organization, is to coach. And again, that tends to be in the development track. But then if you are coaching culture, you've trained your leaders and your managers to be able to coach in the moment and to be able to really like understand what's happening. And that is when it's in the practice of it is where the magic happens, so that it doesn't feel like it's a separate kind of, okay, we're having a coaching call now and it's like we're going into no, it's more like it's a regular, and you're able to shift into that as long as the person is receptive, of course. But again, we've already done that part, so we know that people are coachable. But given that, it's a thing that can happen and be a little bit more fluid, and that's when you're able to really like get the best out of it. Is when coaching can happen in multiple ways and multiple people.
So one of the things that often comes out, and it's interesting how it really gets scrutinized with people practices, meaning when people are looking to invest in a resource from a people standpoint, well, what's the ROI?
Yeah.
What's the return on this investment? And so, well, what is it?
I mean, you just said it, inclusion. When people feel included and they want to stay, they don't leave. So you reduce your turnover costs. So, or at least you have fewer turnover costs, right? So that's a big thing, and that, they're always looking at that. You also have, when you lead with curiosity, you can actually understand issues better, so that leads to fewer conflicts. So then maybe they're also not calling you to investigate something because they were actually there was an issue going on. Getting some coaching has them in a position to better able to handle a conflict, so you don't have to deal with that. So and then just a general feedback culture just is allows you to get to a result quicker, because you're not hemming and hawing around trying to, well, what's the best way and how do I give this and what? No, just you're able to get to the point and move on. And so it increases time and productivity. So I don't know of any organization that wouldn't want those things.
Me neither. And if you go just to the turnover costs, because we hear about people wanting to quit every day.
All day.
The easiest calculation methodology out there is that it costs you 6 to 9 months of a person's salary to replace them. There are far more sophisticated ways to look at turnover costs because there are calculation methodologies, but it is expensive for someone to leave and to replace them. Those dollars alone, most companies are tracking, right? They do look at attrition and turnover and the like. And you can easily set up your coaching program to track to see how those other numbers you're trying to influence are influenced by the coaching.
Right.
So that's important. Productivity. Listen, and we're actually in the process of looking at every investigation we've had over this last 60 years, which is about 80, which is a lot when you consider that we do a lot of other work as well. But I can tell you just off the top that I would venture to guess, we should bet, let's see how much, if I win, about 85% of our complaints boil back to poor feedback, right? Leaders who gave none or gave it so crappily that it landed poorly, and it landed in a way where a person thought they were being discriminated against. And so there is so much value to doing it right, because I can't tell you how often it's like, yeah, but we did tell. Okay, but it was so bad. Like, they didn't know that's what you were giving them feedback about. Like, as a third person, I don't even know what you were giving them feedback about, right? And so it's like this coming back to, we said before, there are no shortcuts. Just do it right in the first place. Like, put the effort in the first place to equip people with the skills to do the work the way you're expecting them to do from a leadership standpoint, right? Of course, I know you don't hire people to be robots, but there are things you expect people to do when they show up here. And so put them in the position to know what they are, to practice them, to get trained on them, right? Like, stop just throwing people into these lightning or firesome situations where they're like trying to be their own firefighter and they don't even know how to turn on the extinguisher.
Right. Exactly. So the support network is huge. It's important in those instances that employees feel like they are set up, put in the best position to succeed. And so if you're thinking about like moving in that direction, thinking about it from a DEI perspective, thinking about it from a culture perspective, all these things, how do you establish that coaching kind of environment within an organization as opposed to more of that kind of top down control? And what is it called? I forget the name of it. It's like a military term, but basically like
Command and control.
Command and control, right?
Yeah.
Right. So how do you make that shift?
Well, first of all, command and control does not even work these days. People do not want to be controlled. Like they don't want to explicitly be controlled. And so, like, it was funny. I was listening to someone yesterday in an investigation interview, and they were like, "Yeah." And he said, "I could get focus time on the weekends. We don't work on the weekends." And I'm like, why would anyone even say that in 2025? That you could go do your work focus stuff on the weekends? Like, and this person was only an interim CEO. So it's like you're coming in and trying to disrupt a culture you haven't even taken any time to understand.
Right.
Weird. Now you're being investigated. And that, I think, gets at, you got to know your culture first, right? Go back and watch our other episodes about doing workplace culture assessments. Like, you need to understand whether you have a feedback culture or not in the first place, right? Because most leaders will think they do, but you dig in, and most clients we go to do not have a feedback culture. So the first thing is, what kind of culture do you have? Do you have what some people have told us is nasty nice, where we're all really nice to each other's face, but we talk mess about each other behind each other's back, and never do we convey that issue to the person we have it with? So it's a lot of talking in closed doors. We hear a lot about open secrets. That's a really fascinating term that's come up, where you have a leader that is just bad and mean or all the other things, and it's an open secret because whoever the decision maker is continues to have blinders on about that. Like, you got to know what you're dealing with, because you can't also just throw a bunch of coaching on top of, land of secrecy. Mm-hmm. So first step in my mind is understand what kind of culture you have to begin with. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have a feedback culture, where are the gaps? What fuels that? Why don't people feel comfortable giving true feedback, right? Because then that helps you to tailor the way in which you would approach building a coaching culture, right? Understanding what sort of change management practices are needed to make that shift, meaning you need to find experts who understand change management. You can't just say, now we're going to be a coaching culture.
No, you cannot. It's going to fall short, because to your point, if people aren't used to receiving feedback, or they're not used to having these kinds of conversations, it's going to be weird. It's going to be foreign. So you got to prep them first to make sure that they're even in a place to be able to do that. And then you got to resource it like everything else. So it's either finding, again, speaking to the internal coaches that you might be able to hire, or train the trainer type things. Get some folks in your organization trained on how to actually coach, right? So that in a way that makes sense for your business, so that they can deliver this in the best way possible. And so when you're thinking about the coaching itself, it really is around shifting the mindset from just telling people what to do, or being really harsh in your feedback and just, all that stuff, to really, again, it's about building awareness. So it starts with curiosity. You got to get curious as to what's going on. You got to give space for people to be able to reflect as opposed to react. Slow it down, which is hard for everyone to do for whatever reason. Slow down so that folks can really understand what's happening and the impact of the work that they're doing. And then give them a chance to really come to these things on their own. And so if done well, again, it can have a great impact on the organization, but you got to think about it in a way that is beneficial to everybody. And so partnership is really key. As we started this whole thing, you asked me what it was. I said it was a partnership, and that's how this has to work. It has to be a partnership between everybody involved.
It's an interesting thing, because as you were talking, it rolled all these examples through my head of how often people haven't gotten curious, and they're coming to us for like a proposal on training or coaching, and we ask one question, and it's like, you can like, dang, y'all didn't think about this. Like, there's so many times where, like, there was a pitch we did in the beginning of 2023, and that coaching was, or maybe the end of 22, but the proposal was, give us a pitch on assessing our overall leadership culture, and give us a pitch for executive coaching for our CEO. Now, we ended up getting the work for the larger leadership assessment, We did not get the work for the CEO coaching. And we learned the CEO never agreed to getting coaching. He
How
never
are y'all
asked
putting
for
out a
it.
bid? How are you putting out a bid?
He didn't think he needed coaching. And I'm like, how did we even have the opportunity to pitch for work when the person who theoretically needed the coaching
wasn't bought in?
He needed the coaching. Like,
how was that ever going to be successful? How?
Well, we know it wasn't, because we happen to know the person who ended up in that coaching role and was like, this is not coaching. He doesn't even think he needs coaching. And it's sort of like, we understand what happens when people are fed up, right? What happens when people are fed up, when they've tried to tell you all the different ways that stuff is not going well, and they don't feel like you, the CEO, were listening. Then they start trying to slap solutions, Band-Aids. Well, maybe if he just gets coaching, he could understand us better. And it's like, it doesn't work that way. Coaching is a partnership. Both parties need to want to be part of that partnership. So don't just come in slapping solutions, because you're just going to frustrate yourself and everybody else in the process, because people are going to ask us the same thing. So how did this person even start doing coaching? How did you decide that? How did you know this was a thing that needed to do? And you're just sitting there looking crazy because you just were fed up and said, well, he needs coaching. And it's like, he needs to know he needs coaching for that to actually be true. So if we're zooming back out and looking at sort of what we're conveying here in this episode today, coaching is not an executive perk. Hopefully your executives know how to lead already, and this would just be helping them refine skills, not develop them in the first place. Leaders and managers are two different roles. Please be sure you understand that, because you have many leaders in your company that don't manage teams. So everyone is potentially a candidate for coaching. But what we're not saying is just slap coaching label on everyone, because some people are not coachable. Some people are not willing coaching participants. And so make sure you understand why you're doing it. And then be equitable about it and thoughtful of how people are selected for it, because anybody can be a leader. And then understand your goals. We're telling you today it can help improve inclusion in your organization, which can lead to less conflict, can lead to less departure, can lead to more innovation and collaboration. And so there are real, true returns on investing in coaching. We can help you with a coaching program, because it's something we happen to do really well. Remember, we offer 5-star treatment, especially if you get me and Shanté. It's amazing. So call us, we can help. And find us everywhere on the web, on our internet. We don't have our own internet, but on the internet that everybody has access to, thenorthisfirm.com, LinkedIn, Facebook. Like, subscribe, tell us what you want to hear, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
Here it is. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and leadership. That's the deal when you know what you're dealing with.